Welcome to the I'm In podcast, where you learn to unleash your creative genius, live a more abundant life, and change your world. And now, your host, Heather Hodges.
I met today's guest through a mutual friend, Bud Langham, and after Bud introduced us, we were having our first conversation on Zoom, and we kind of both wondered why he introduced us. But it didn't take us long to figure it out. We instantly made a connection. We respect each other's work. Elizabeth Vahey Smith joins us today. She is an expert in trauma-informed leadership and the creator of the Rise Capacity Model. She is from Virginia and now lives in Vietnam. And on the Hodges 12, she is a Healer-Synthesizer-Cultivator. Elizabeth, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Heather. I am so excited to have another conversation with you, especially after our first one went off so well.
I know. It's interesting. You're in Vietnam. I'm in Dallas, Texas. So finding a time on the calendar, a time on our 24-hour clock where you're awake and I'm awake is tricky. And our first conversation, I think you and I could probably have a conversation about anything for hours. So I'm so glad you are joining us today.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited about where we take this one.
Yeah, me too. Well, tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, how you are in Vietnam, and just a little bit about your work.
Yes. So my story is just this eclectic kind of mix. It's a very creative story. I started as a linguist. I was doing translation work in Papua New Guinea. And after we transitioned out of that work in 2020, we started traveling the world full time. And so that's what ultimately brought us here to Da Nang, Vietnam, where we've been hanging out for the past year, really just enjoying a bit of stillness after the rapid travel that my family has experienced. And here I've been working on developing the Rise Capacity Model. And so for what I do, I help people who manage teams in the workplace deal with seemingly impossible situations around team well-being and performance, like the stress that you have no control over that's burning out your team, or this one team member that you've talked with 100 times about performance expectations and they're still not getting it. I help leaders solve problems in a way that builds healthy workplace cultures and builds their team's capacity at the same time.
Gosh, this is such important work, Elizabeth, I think so many teams struggle with this. Even if it's not overtly said, like there's always this undercurrent. So, something else is going on. And I'm so glad you're doing this work. Wow. So, Elizabeth, I'm curious, when you think about the word creativity, what comes to mind?
Yeah. Now, I know that this isn't like the right answer, but the honest answer is the arts. And especially people who have found this novel way of expressing an idea in a way that engages the heart of their audience.
So it's not just the arts. There's that added element of connecting with the heart of the audience, just what that audience may be feeling, experiencing, desiring. Did I get that right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's where the magic happens. And when I think about it, I'm thinking about the arts, right? But what true creativity feels like to me is that ability to tap into the heart of the audience and get them to feel something.
Yeah. And that definition is absolutely accurate. And what I'm finding is that there's a lot more to it. But I love that you brought that up because I think that is just a nuanced definition of when we look at creativity and the arts that, wait, no, there's a deeper element to it that's important. So, but before you took the Hodges 12 Types of Creative Genius, would you have considered yourself creative?
To a degree, I would have. But again, I was thinking about the arts, right?
Yeah.
And I dabble in the arts. And so I don't have the skills that I would love to have because I'm dabbling instead of making a solid practice of it. But yes, so to a degree, but I wasn't really valuing yet the creative work of how I deal with workplace problems and those kinds of situations. I wasn't esteeming it in the same way as the arts.
Wow. Okay, so there's two parts there I just really want to unpack. First of all, tell me about your dabbling. What in the world of the arts, what are you dabbling in?
I have dabbled a lot in painting. I've done some like seamstressing. I made my best friend's prom dress for her.
Wow.
And my flower girl dress. So I've like done some things of that nature. I really love painting. And recently I dabbled in map making and making this huge map that showed our trip. We went on safari in Kruger National Park. And so I plotted out where we saw all of these different animals and put them there on the map. And so it's like our trip through Kruger and where we saw all the animals and the animals we saw there.
That is so cool. A cartologist.
Yes.
That is so awesome. Okay, so your artistic abilities are varied as well. So that's pretty cool. But one of the things I heard you say is that you hadn't connected creativity with the work that you do in your consulting work and in your speaking. And so on the Hodges 12, you're a healer, synthesizer, cultivator. And I'm curious about your thoughts about that profile. And was there one of those three types that you resonated the most with, and were like, yes, that's me?
Yes. So the one that I resonated the most with was the synthesizer. I love pulling tidbits of information and experiences and combining them in unique ways to solve problems. Like that's my favorite thing.
Wow. And I am finding that that's one of the rarest types of creative genius.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Just from the research, I've had hundreds of people now take the assessment, and it rarely hits the top one, the number one place, and it's one of the rarest in the top three profiles. So that's really cool that you have that. And I'm just thinking about your work in general, your travel, and your map making of, let me synthesize all this information, where we saw those animals, and let's just put this on a document. Let me put this on a piece of artwork that shows where we saw everything. That is really cool.
Yeah, it was. I didn't think about that as that. It's so fun how the different pieces come together, even in these conversations, making those connections. But yeah, that's a great example of that synthesizing.
Yeah. Well, how do you see your top three types working together?
Well, honestly, it's the cycle of how I work when I'm working, especially with my clients, but also with my direct reports. So first, what I do is I notice when people aren't operating at their best, and I get really curious about what's holding them back. And that's that healer part. And then the synthesizer, I'm pulling together pieces to offer some creative solutions before I shift into that cultivator genius to empower them back to thriving in their work. And so that's the workflow that I also teach my clients how to do. And then in leadership coaching, I do that work of synthesis for my clients a lot. Like I'm training them in how to do it, but I'm also the person who pulls it together and says, here's an action plan that you can actually rollout. And so it gives them an action plan, even if their creative genius isn't synthesizer, which apparently is very uncommon. Yeah.
Rare and
New
precious.
information
I
there.
think one of the reasons it's uncommon is it's just higher order of creative thoughts in the creative process. So it's, pulling things across multiple domains. Well, I would love to hear more about your work and what you're doing right now, what you're building or leading that you are excited about.
Yes. So I am developing a tool for companies that reduces the experience of workplace stress, of employee stress, even when we can't control the stressors.
Okay. I think a lot of people are going to be interested to hear about this. Say more.
Yeah. So I've been conducting research, and I have found that there are 4 factors that, when present, people will walk out of the most harrowing stories with incredible resilience and recovery.
Okay.
And when I've collected workplace horror stories, some or all of these factors were missing.
Okay.
So I've been using these 4 factors, I call them the RISE capacity model, with my clients as this diagnostic tool, as a preventive tool. And we've seen this huge impact on well-being and belonging, even when the news cycle or layoffs or system changes are besieging them.
Wow.
They're still thriving.
Yeah. Yeah. You are saying some crazy, amazing words in there. I'm thinking about, the trauma, the horror stories, being besieged by the news cycle or what's going on in the culture. So let me make sure I get this right. You have identified 4 characteristics, elements, things that if they're not there, or that you're noticing that when these things are not present, that's when you hear the horror stories. Is that right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. All right. What are they? Do you want to tell us about it?
Yeah,
And is this the RISE model?
Yeah, so this is the RISE capacity model.
RISE
And
capacity.
RISE is our acronym.
Okay.
So the first 2 are more often considered internal things, but they're skills. And if they're skills, they can be taught, right? If it's something that we learn, it's something that we can teach.
Right.
And so the first one is what I call reset tactics. And this is the ability that even when there is chaos going on in the world around us, that I have the ability to reset and feel secure again. I can create that even while chaos is happening around me. And so some of this is the way that we think about problems. Some of this is the way that we release stress from our bodies at the end of the day. But these are skills that people sometimes pick up over the course of their lifetime, but sometimes they don't. Sometimes they don't have these skills. And it makes a huge difference if they have the reset tactics.
Okay. Wow. And what are some of them that you're finding that work for a majority of people, but we may not have picked them up like you're talking about?
So sometimes one of the huge kind of mental frameworks is recognizing that we grow through hard things. And when we see hard things as an opportunity to up-level our skills, then we don't shift into this mindset of like, why me? Why is this happening to me? Which when we face a problem and we say, why me? That's going to increase the stress that we feel. And when we face a problem and we say, okay, this is an opportunity for me to gain skills in something, I don't even know what yet, but I'm going to look forward to seeing what that is, then we handle the situation with a better experience of stress, where our stress is working for us and not overwhelming us.
Yeah. So you're saying that just that mental reframe of this isn't happening to me, like poor me, versus, oh, this is hard. I'm going to have an opportunity to grow in this moment or get better in this skill.
Yeah, it changes everything.
Oh my gosh. It's it sounds intuitive, but massively challenging.
Right. And so not everyone has had these skills. And so often I talk to people and I ask in my interviews, where did you learn how to do this?
Yeah.
And some of them say, well, my dad taught me this. Well, I had a mentor who spoke this into me. And so we look around and we realize not everyone had those same opportunities. It's wonderful when they do, but not everyone does. And so when we're thinking about the workplace, then we just kind of assume that everybody has these skills and that they can have a hard day at the office and they're going to go home and they're going to reset. But then if they don't know how, if they go home and their home life is even harder than their work life, like they're not getting those opportunities to reset and they lack the skills. And so teaching these skills, rather than it being, okay, my mentor spoke this into me. Well, now the mentor can be our company, right? Like my leaders have said this to me. And this is what we've been trained to do at our company, that when hard things happen, we think about it this way. And so we can create these lessons by embedding them into our culture.
Wow. And it changes everything.
It changes everything.
Okay, so that is R. So reset tactics. What is I?
I is initiative. And again, this kind of comes from within, but it's the ability to do something to make the situation better 10% or 100%. And a lot of people can get, and when we're talking about a traumatic situation, especially, trauma happens. One of the key ingredients is that people feel helpless.
Yeah.
And so when people feel empowered, that situation is almost never becomes traumatic for them. But a lot of people say, well, if I can't fix the situation, then I'm helpless. And so it's 100% or bust, rather than seeing, well, maybe you can make the situation a little bit better. And that's something that you can do rather than falling into the state of helplessness. And as companies, there is so much that we can do to help our people not fall into helplessness by training them, by empowering them, by making sure that when they're advocating for things, it's not a feeling of helplessness that follows, but they get some kind of response that feels helpful and meaningful to them. And so there are some ways that we can work to make sure that our employees have both of these factors, even though we often think about them as an internal skill rather than something that we support in the culture and the environment that we create.
They are, yes. So while they are internal, what I am just coming back to that I am kind of geeking out about is that how you're training them and how you're teaching them and how people can onboard these skills to change their perspective and their work life. And when you think about initiative, and one of the things that I kept coming back to in my mind as you were talking was just about that self-efficacy of, okay, that ownership. And yeah, I am in control of me. I may not be in control of the situation, but I can control me. And that initiative changes everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow. Okay, so reset tactics, initiative, and then S.
S is for social support. And so here we're looking at our supervisors, and research has shown that our supervisor has as much impact on our mental health as our spouse does.
Wow.
So having support from our supervisor that is actually supportive is huge. But another thing is our colleagues. And are we creating an environment that is collaborative, and interdependent in our teams, even in more competitive industries? We can have a culture that has good sportsmanship versus a cutthroat nature to it. And so what does that look like to make sure that our team members are supporting each other? But another thing I find really important about the social support is also the individual's ability to plug into those systems. Because sometimes it's really hard to ask for help, and it's really vulnerable to receive help from others. You have to open yourself up to even communicate that you need support. And so the way that we create our workplace culture is going to increase the psychological safety and make it more accessible for individuals to help each other in that company. So that when stress gets high, no one feels like they've been abandoned by their team.
Right. Wow. So there's so many layers and elements to the social support. You're talking about leader support, but also collaboration team support, but then the added element of knowing how to plug into that support, but then also being willing to ask for the help and want it or look for it. Wow, that's rich.
Yeah.
There's a lot there. And it is, I've seen that same research on leader support and mental well-being. And I know that you and I have both had experiences in our career, because we've talked about them, where leader support was not there. And it was actually traumatic for each of us in different ways, and how much that has impacted mental health, outlook, but then also helped us navigate our careers to this moment where you're doing your work and I'm doing my work. So there is growth capacity even beyond trauma in the workplace.
Yeah, absolutely. And remembering that during hard times, back to what I was saying with that reset tactic. And that was one of the things that I really treasured in my heart the entire time I was going through that situation was, I know something good is going to come from this. And I don't know what it is right now. And it feels awful right now, but I'm really excited to figure out what good thing is going to come from this.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there are so many people who will be listening to this podcast who will identify with that and know what it feels like to be in that pit of despair of, I can't believe this happened to me. I can't believe that supervisor is doing that. I can't believe I got laid off. I can't believe whatever. But knowing that there's hope on the other side of it is really powerful.
Yeah. Yeah, it is something to treasure even in those darkest times.
Okay, so social support. And the final one, E.
E is for systemic efficacy. And so what we're looking for here is that the systems that are in place actually work.
Yeah.
In contrast to all of those systems that pretend to work and don't actually work.
They look good on paper, but they're not helping anybody.
It's a really cute concept, except when you try to use them. Yes.
Wow. So what are some examples of that?
So we can have broken systems. And so a broken system would be oftentimes trying to report to HR, right? Reporting anything about leadership and making those reports. It is a socially assumed thing that HR is not actually helpful. And that's tragic because I know a lot of people in HR actually genuinely want to be helpful. And yet there are systems that are tying their hands in this situation. And so those are our broken systems. There are also systems that are non-existent, where this is a situation where there really should be a system and there isn't one. And so I was talking with somebody who was doing disaster relief, and their organization did not have a system to have that person removed from the situation and recuperate outside of the situation before going back in. And so burnout was experienced. And it was the lack of a really great system and not Not that there was a system that was broken, but there just wasn't a system at all for it.
Mm-hmm.
The other place where we see this too are systems that exist, but no one knows about them. And so people are like, well, why didn't you do X, Y, and Z? And those people are like, I had no idea that was even an option to me.
Mm-hmm. So resources that might be available that the employees had no idea were resources.
Right, exactly. Or ways to escalate situations, ways to advocate for people that they just didn't realize were options for them. And one of the things that happens when we don't have good systems in our workplace is that people are then living and operating out of uncertainty. And we don't like to operate out of uncertainty.
It makes us anxious.
It makes us really anxious. And when we're anxious, then we start operating out of a self-protective place rather than a focus on what's going to be good for the company.
Yeah.
We're starting to be self-protective and self-defensive, and we're no longer working for the benefit of the company. Whereas if we could have a little bit of certainty, if we knew what was going to happen, then there would be the psychological safety in place. And so instead of having to be anxious and worried about what's going to happen to us, we can take risks that are going to benefit the company. We can speak up. We can get work done more efficiently because the systems actually work for us. And so that's what I've seen largely around systemic efficacy.
Wow. So the RISE capacity model, reset tactics, initiative, social support, and system efficacy. I'm curious, can you tell us maybe a case study, or how do you use the RISE capacity model in your training, in your work, in your consulting?
So there are a couple different ways that we can do this. One, we can do this on a preventive scale. And so in a preventive scale, what we'll do is we'll sit down and we will diagnose the situation. We'll say, what in general do your team members have these things or not have these things? And who has them? And so we want to I have a worksheet that we use, and we can write out the names of our direct reports and say, is this a skill that they have or is it not? Are they aware of our system? Do they trust our systems or do they not trust our systems? And then looking at that, we can say, all right, where do we need to think strategically about how we can implement these things, either as an entire company, because really nobody on our team has this, or as support for an individual on our team. And so we can use it as a preventive tool that way. I also like to use it as an episodic tool. And so in moments of high stress, for leaders to sit down and run through the RISE capacity and say, what factors are in place right now and what factors aren't in place right now? And what can we do in order to plug in missing factors to help reduce this experience of stress? And so sometimes we've got, and I've had this with somebody on my team, in general, they have all four of these things in place. But there was this one thing that we were having a problem where she was not performing the way that she needed to perform. And so I asked her supervisor, okay, how is she running through these on that particular issue? And we saw that on that particular issue, she didn't have the reset tactics that she needed. She was lacking the initiative. Where she usually reaches out for support, she was isolating herself and she wasn't using the systems that existed. And so what we worked on was, how can we strategically focus on building these things and plugging these four things into place and seeing the transformation that follows.
Wow. Fascinating. That is just real. It's not, the tool itself, the model itself sounds so practical too, that you're able to use it in a preventative way, but then also, as you said, episodically, to help a team in the moment work through whatever they're going through at that time. That's really great. So creativity in action, like, wow, like this is really phenomenal. Well, I'm curious, when you think back to when the Rise Capacity model came into the world and when you created it, what prompted it in the first place?
That I'm so glad you asked that question. So I had the president of an organization come to me. We were on a call together, and he was asking why some of the newer people on his team seemed so fragile. And working in a high stress industry, there's a real risk when team members don't seem to be able to manage stress well. Mm-hmm. And I didn't have a great answer for him in that specific moment, but I went to bed that night and the pieces all came together as I slept. And the next day I spent 12 hours pulling together the earliest version of this idea.
Mm-hmm. Wow. First of all, isn't that amazing that just a question can prompt that kind of creativity? And then the incubation process, sleeping on it, and then waking up with the insight, and then 12 hours later, wow, I love it. Wow.
Yeah.
And then how has it evolved over time since that time?
So I took that first iteration and I started talking with people about it. And so getting other people's inputs, like looking for the blind spots. And one of the first things that I did, originally my model didn't have systemic efficacy. And I sat down with my husband and I showed him, we've got two internal ones and we've got this external one. And also when you look at it, the reset tactics and social support are a bit of like a comforting kind of measure, whereas the the initiative or the self-efficacy, as you called it, was more of a proactive response. And so my husband was like, well, where's the external proactive response then? Where's that balance?
Yeah.
And I was like,
there it is.
That's a very good point. And so I pulled that piece in. And I remember I got on the phone call with my mother, and my mother is of the boomer generation and had this, when I explained what the president of the organization said, she went off on her opinions about how the younger generations have so much trouble and everything's traumatic for them. And I remember sitting down with her and saying, well, okay, listen, honestly, mother, this is your fault, right? Like you did something. You raised us differently than how you were raised. What did you do differently? And what she told me was that when she was little, her parents were not around. She did so much on her own, doing her own things. And she was capable of doing what it took to care for herself. And then what happened was she thought, man, maybe I should actually know where my children are. And so when I was being raised, I had parents in my household who were telling me what to do constantly. And so with that presence of supervision came a lack of autonomy. And that skill of initiative, of being able to, solve a situation and step forward and do what it takes, we see that in lesser degrees in the more recent generations because their parents were there for them and telling them how to do everything. And so they never learned that they could do things by themselves.
Wow.
And so all of these conversations just had these pieces fall into place. And then it continued as I was conducting interviews and just learning the depth of these four things and really expanding the multiple different ways that they might show up in the workplace.
Wow. Oh my gosh, I love that story so much. What's funny is, what do you call your mom? Do you call her mother?
My mom. Yeah. I call her mom.
Mom.
Sometimes,
Okay. Yeah.
yeah.
My mom is no longer with us, but I called her mother, but she was of that generation too. I'm like, yeah, this is your fault. I love that. Like, but you're right. Generationally, how children are raised plays such a big part in our ability to rise, to reset, to have that self-efficacy and creativity. And, as well. There's a lot of research on that. Well, I'm curious, when you are your most creative, like when you're like deep in your creative thought process, what conditions or environments help you do your most creative work?
Yeah. Okay, there are a few things. One is rest, which is key, but I struggle to do because I am a product of the society that I was raised in that wrongly believes that rest is for the lazy.
Yeah.
So that's important, and I wish I did it more, but I am bad at it. The next one is having blocks of time for deep work and having space to be able to get in the zone on projects. But then thirdly is input. So as a synthesizer, I pull ideas from sources. And so I need to spend time consuming information every day. And I try to do this as a discipline for an hour a day, but usually I get an idea 15 minutes in and then run off with it.
That's so great. But everything you've been telling me about in our conversation today just shows that synthesizer genius. The input, just that question from the CEO, your husband's question, your conversation with your mom, just it all comes together and, helps you do your best creative work. But the time and space, so the deep work, is there a particular location that you like to be in when you need to do heads down deep work?
I am a creature of habit. And so I am in this space right here at my desk. Occasionally working at a different location can be fun, but I don't know that I do my deepest work there. It's more a novel experience for some of the more monotonous to-dos on my plate. But I find that having a lot of natural light helps.
Yeah.
Making sure that my children aren't in the room is a huge thing that really helps a lot. My children love to tell me whatever thoughts run through their mind in that moment. And so creating a bit of solitude that's well lit.
Wow, that's so great. And thank you for allowing us to be in your creative space today for this conversation. What an honor. So
it is my joy. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, when we think about, creativity is that, coming up with these new and novel and useful ideas, and innovation is putting those ideas into practice. What's the hardest part, in your opinion, for that process of turning creativity into innovation?
I think it is securing buy-in from all of the relevant parties and getting them to work together. This is also my favorite part of the process, but I do think it's the hardest part.
Yeah. The buy-in of it.
Getting that buy-in. I think it's huge. And so one of the things that I find that's really important is for me to find those connections between things and pull them together, especially between people and ideas. And so what I'm looking for is that common thread between how does this person see the world and why this idea, like building our employees' capacity for stress, is important. And then I pull on that thread to bring those two pieces together. I've done a lot of sewing projects, which is probably...
So that's the metaphors. I love it.
Metaphors, yeah.
Brilliant. Oh my gosh. So there's, that artistic creative genius you've got going on there as well. Well, okay, so you are from the U.S. You're from Virginia. but you live in Vietnam. And so there's that added cultural element of your work and creativity. I'm curious if you have noticed your creative genius or creativity itself showing up differently when you are working across cultures like you do so much.
Yeah. So the core of my work is about well-being and capacity. Mm-hmm. And so as a human need, it transcends culture, even if it looks different in different places. Mm. And so when I'm outside of the US, I have to rely more on a local's expertise about what is culturally normal or what is culturally ideal and what are the threads that connect the human need to cultural values to secure that buy-in from people.
Yeah.
And honestly, this is a good practice to do anywhere, to not make assumptions and make sure that we're on the same page culturally. Mm-hmm. So I do try to do this more in my work in the States too, and ask questions instead of just assuming that my understanding matches yours.
Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh, what a great reminder. Like it's not, when you think going from one country to the next, yes, of course, we need to ask questions. You need to get that, insight from the locals or, from the people that are there in that culture. But that's in every team, every organization. And it's not just from Texas to New York. It's from the education or HR department to the finance department. Everybody, there's cultural differences everywhere. And we shouldn't make those assumptions. Gosh, thanks for that reminder. Brilliant. Wow.
Thank you.
Well, Elizabeth, this has been a fascinating conversation. But before I let you go, my research assistant, Percy the Penguin, has a couple of questions for you. Percy, are you there? Come on in, Percy. All right, Elizabeth, here's Percy. He's got a couple of questions for you. The first question that Percy has for you comes from a previous guest, Cecilia de la Hoz from Madrid, Spain. And she would like to know, what creative thought has surprised you? What has come into your mind and you went, oh, wow, I didn't expect that to come out of my brain?
Oh my goodness. What a great question. And what a hard question. I think one of the things that has surprised me, other than, the whole rise capacity model, was when I created the visual for looking at the rise capacity model. Because what I needed to do was create a plus or minus system for 4 dimensions, thinking about all of the different rise factors. Mm-hmm. And I have never seen a chart that showed that before. And so we were definitely walking into a very creative space in order to visually present this concept in a way that was going to make sense for people. Yeah. And so what I ended up doing was doing a plus or minus small square with just 4 things. But I put it 4 times on the board and I put them in different rooms. And so I have a room that has the lights on for systemic efficacy. So the 2 at the top have the lights on for systemic efficacy. And the 2 on the side have a candle for social support. And so the top corner, there's one top corner that's very brightly lit, and there's one bottom corner that's very dark.
Ah, okay.
And the idea is that if you have social support and you have systemic efficacy, it's like you are in a lit room with a friend holding a candle. And then regardless of the presence of those other things, like that's the best room to be in. Mm-hmm. But if you don't have systemic efficacy, the lights are out. And if you don't have a friend with a candle in the room, you're alone in the dark. And the presence or minus of those other things, either way, you're in the darkest room possible over there. And so it was just this clever way of expressing a very complex set of a very complex model And I was really proud of it when I finished pulling it together.
Well, I mean, I could totally envision it too. So instead of just your basic 2x2 matrix, you gave us a visual of what it feels like, not just what it is,
Yes.
to be in those different quadrants. Wow, that's really cool. So I want to see that. I mean, I can see it in my mind the way you described it, but I want to see the way you have illustrated. I love it so much. Well, Percy's second question for you is, what question would you like to ask a future guest?
Oh, yes. Okay. What is a quote that you heard one day that changed how you approach challenges?
What's a quote that you heard one day that changes how you approach challenges?
Yes.
Ooh, that's a good one. Thank you. Thank you for that. Well, Elizabeth, I have enjoyed our conversation so much. Where can our listeners get a hold of you? Where can they find you?
I'm around here in Vietnam mostly. I'm also on LinkedIn and Instagram, and I can give you my website.
Okay.
There's also, I have a free 1-hour training that walks through that diagnostic tool. And if your listeners would be interested in that, I can send you over the link too.
Fantastic. I will put that in the episode notes. And that's free to our listeners?
Yeah, that'll be free, and it shows the diagnostic tool. I explain each one of those. I walk them through how to use the diagnostic tool so that they can kind of take a glance at their team and see what they're working with.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. That's very, very generous of you. And thank you for saying I'm in to being on the podcast with us today.
It was my pleasure. Thanks so much for this great conversation.
And thank you for joining us in this conversation. And if you haven't followed us yet, please hit that follow button and we will show up in your feed when a new episode drops. And I would love it if you would leave a review. It helps more people find us and join the conversation. And if you want to discover your own creative genius type, please go to my website to take the assessment, and I will put a link in the episode notes. It's thehodges12.com. And until next time, keep saying I'm in to creativity and bold thinking, transformational growth, and meaningful conversations. May you be wildly creative in your life and leadership. I'll see you soon.